Hello everyone, Nick with Yoda's Survival and Off-Road. I trying something new. I picked up this camera mount and I'm going to try and use this time going from work to home to try and make a video or two. Tonight it's just going to be an experiment. Don't even know if I'm going to post this one. But just in case I do, I figure I might as well do something, at least have a topic. There was one that I really wanted to do. I don't think I'm going to do it right now. Talking about fear. I think it's an important topic, and it's something that we need to talk about. I just don't think I'm going to talk about it tonight. Or right now. That's more something I want to talk about sitting still. It's really kind of in depth. Here's an interesting one. This is just for me. Manual transmissions versus automatic. If you pay close enough attention, you'll notice while I'm driving that I'm actually shifting gears. I drive a 2003 Nissan Xterra. It's a great little rig. I love it. It's got the V6, a little underpowered, but it's got the 5-speed manual transmission and 4-wheel drive, which is actually kind of on the rare end of the spectrum for these particular vehicles. Most of them were built with automatics if they had the V6 and 4-wheel drive, or if it was 4-wheel drive with a manual transmission, it had the 4-speed. The true unicorn as far as the Xterra world goes is the supercharged Nissan Xterra V6 with the manual transmission and 4-wheel drive. Very rare, very hard to find. I was just ecstatic to find the one with the manual transmission and the V6 and 4-wheel drive. I don't need a supercharger. Would it add a little bit more power? Yeah, but what expense? At what expense? The expense being the terrible fuel economy that they get. I have a friend that has one of the supercharged Pathfinders, the pickups, but his is a pre-runner. It's not actually 4-wheel drive. It's just the 4-wheel drive suspension on a 2-wheel with no front axle on it. Great truck, but 2-wheel drive and a pickup with the 5-speed, he was only getting 12 to 14 miles to the gallon. Absolutely horrible fuel economy. So this isn't a whole lot better. I'm getting between 16 and 19 miles to the gallon right now, and I'm good with that, considering my other truck, my other option, is my 86 Toyota pickup with a small block Chevy V8 and a 4-speed. And it only gets 10 to 12 miles per gallon of propane. And it runs solely on propane. So it gets kind of expensive to fill that up in the wintertime when propane prices go up. But in the summertime, the fuel is dirt cheap. So, but it has no heater, it's got no interior in it, it's noisy, it rattles, it's a great off-roader, terrible daily driver. Absolutely horrible daily driver. So I have this for a daily driver, my Xterra, and this is a great truck. I love this thing. It is a terrific off-roader. I haven't had to do any really extreme off-roading yet. I also haven't tried for a while. For the longest time, for 3.5 years, this was my wife's everyday driver. So we picked her up a different vehicle that's a little more practical for her and the kids, and this one's become mine. So enough about all of that in general. Manual transmission versus automatic transmission. I've heard a lot of arguments both ways for the different transmission types. Automatic transmissions now are or can be more fuel efficient. back in the old days, when automatics were still relatively new, automatic transmissions were horrible for fuel economy. They didn't have lockups, they were constantly slipping. They had a real bad propensity for burning fluid. The old Chevy Turbo 350 automatic transmission was a constantly variable transmission. The torque converter didn't lock up, and it didn't create a fixed gear. Now, a fixed gear versus a constantly shifting. You look at a manual transmission. When you push the clutch in, it disengages the transmission. You can come to a stop, or you can change gears. When you let the clutch out, it positively engages, which means it becomes fully locked. It doesn't slip, or it shouldn't. It shouldn't slip, and for the purpose of this explanation, it doesn't slip. The Turbo 350, on the other hand, the torque converter acts like a clutch. It takes the fluid and through some voodoo that I'm not going to explain right now. I know how it works, and it's really difficult to explain in a short amount of time. So instead of explaining how it works is, I'm just going to go absolutely basic. Through voodoo and fluid, the engine spins up and creates pressure. And that pressure grabs a hold of different clutches inside the torque converter and transfers power from the engine into the transmission. Well, the problem with that system is that it's not always engaged. It's never completely engaged. Sorry, never completely engaged. It always allows a little bit of a variance inside the torque converter, inside the clutch essentially, that allows it to slip a little bit. So you stand on the throttle and you get all kinds of power, but it takes a lot of power to run the transmission. It takes sometimes 20% of the power the engine produces to actually get the power the engine produces to the ground through the transmission and the differentials. So they were highly inefficient systems. And because of that, because of the way they worked, they also burned the fluid a lot. And when the fluid burns, it starts to degrade. As it degrades, it compromises the clutch material inside the transmission that actually creates the gears, the actual driving force that propels your vehicle down the road. So there were a lot of flaws in the system. Modern transmissions now, especially some of the newest of the European cars, the automatic transmissions aren't actually automatic transmissions. They are electronically controlled gear-to-gear manual transmissions. You don't have a gear stick, you don't have a clutch pedal. All of that is handled by the computer. Some of the more performance-oriented versions give you Flappy paddle. If you watch Top Gear like I do, that's funny. I think it's hilarious. But the Flappy paddles are the little shifter paddles on the steering, or somewhere around the steering wheel. And the more modern high-performance versions of those vehicles have the Flappy paddle gearboxes. Well, it's still a manual transmission. It just has electronically controlled gear shift and clutch. So I prefer a manual transmission over an automatic because it gives me a certain amount of control over everything. Now, are there some limitations? There are. There's lots of limitations to a manual transmission. The manual transmission, the 4-speed that's in my Toyota, it's an old GM 4-speed out of a 1-ton truck, and it doesn't have a very good selection of gears. Because it's a 4-speed, and one of those speeds is a granny low gear, which is worthless on the road. I cannot use it on the street unless I have a very heavy load. Well, my Toyota's never going to pull, so that gear is kind of worthless unless I'm off-road. If I'm off-road and I have to climb a big hill or something, then that gear is perfect. Put the transfer case in 4 low, put it in granny low gear on the transmission. I can get out and walk next to the truck while it idles up a hill, very steep hill. So it has advantages and it has disadvantages. The 5-speed transmission that's in this, in the Xterra, has a little more give. It gives me an extra option. It gives me an in-between gear that I use. I use third gear when I'm cruising at between 20 and 35 miles an hour. Fourth gear gets me from 35 up to 50, and fifth gear gets me from 50 out to 65, 70 if I really want to push this that fast. This rig isn't comfortable at anything over 60 miles an hour. At least I'm not comfortable pushing it that fast. If I had the automatic version of this, I've seen people with this exact same gear and exact same setup, with the only difference being the automatic transmission, doing 85, 95 down the highway. And they're running probably maxed out on the RPMs. But they don't care. They don't, all they feel is they put the pedal down and it goes. Whereas I have to pay attention. I have to listen to what the engine's doing, what the engine's telling me. And it gives me a much more tactile feedback, which I like. I like being able to have the input from the vehicle, the input back to me from the vehicle. That goes into another tangent of me being a driver versus other people that just drive cars. I look at driving as a privilege and a joy, whereas other people look at driving as a chore and, oh, why do I have to do this today? I don't want to drive. Which is a terrible way of looking at it as far as I'm concerned. You can't enjoy driving, then don't own a car. And that's kind of selfish of me to say and a little backwards. I know. I'm sorry. Sort of. Maybe a little. Maybe not. But driving isn't a chore. It's a pain in the ass at times, especially when you've got people on the road that only look at driving as something that you have to do. You don't have to drive anywhere. I don't. I want to drive. I love driving, so I do. So, tangent. Again, with the tangents. Manual transmission versus automatic. It comes down to personal preference. What are you comfortable with? What are you using the vehicle for? My wife's vehicle is our highway cruiser. It's what we are going to use to take road trips and things of that nature. I'm not going to go wheeling in it. It is not an off-road vehicle, not by any stretch of the imagination. It is way too swank for that. Way too swank. I don't want to scratch it. Am I going to get my feelings hurt if it gets a ding in the door sitting in a parking lot? No, because it's a pre-owned vehicle. I didn't pay a whole lot for it. And why get, my feelings hurt over something that I can't control? So, my wife's vehicle is her daily driver, and it's a highway cruiser. I don't want to have to, it sucks sitting in traffic having to hold down the clutch. Like right now. Right now, I've got to sit here with my foot on the clutch, waiting with it in first gear, waiting for the light to change, and then waiting, once I get the light change, waiting for the people in front of me to actually decide that they're going to go. So, in traffic, in town, things like that, a manual transmission, not so much fun. In traffic on the highway, it's not exactly the easiest thing to do. You just have to be used to it like I am. As many years as I've driven manual transmissions, it's what I prefer. Now, the automatic has a place, and like I said, my wife's highway cruiser, it's perfect. In town, on the highway, you don't have to hold the clutch down, you don't have to hold the brakes down, you don't have to worry about missing a gear like I just did. But if you miss a gear, that goes into my truck driving training, you miss a gear, you learn how to recover quickly. It just becomes second nature. Because in a semi, if you miss a gear at the wrong time, you're in a lot of trouble. You're heading for a world of hurt quick. And it's the same when you're off-roading. This rig goes off-road. All I do, I drive it around town, and I like to go off-road. It hauls the kids if I need to go camping and stuff like that, so I don't break the wife's daily. And then I get people like this that decide that they need to pull out directly in front of me. Wow! People, come on, pay attention. Stop looking at your phone. Quit looking at your dog in the passenger seat. Look at the road. You're mounted directly underneath my center rear view mirror, by the way, which is why it looks like I look at you on a regular basis. It's because I'm constantly scanning all my mirrors. More training. So I prefer a manual transmission. What do you prefer? Do you like an automatic or do you like a manual? Do you like the comfort and the ease of being able to just select a gear and drive? I can see in certain four-wheeling situations where an automatic is beneficial. If you get on a really nasty hill and you got to change gears, it'd be sweet to be able to just put the hammer down a little bit and make the rig change it for you without having to grab a clutch. Or if you stall up on a hill, get the rig restarted. You don't have to sit there with your foot on the clutch and a foot on the brake and a foot on the gas to try and get rolling again. I've done it. It sucks. But it's one of those things that you have to have skill to be able to do. And driving a manual transmission all the time gives you certain skills. So, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this. I prefer a manual, but I see the point of an automatic. I see where they have their benefits. I wish I had an automatic in my semi, but that's only because the clutch on my semi that I drove was about 95 pounds. So when I got stuck in traffic, I had to hold a 95-pound pedal down. That hurts after a long period of time. So let me know what you think. What do you prefer? Do you like an automatic or do you prefer a manual? What do you use already? What are you comfortable with? Why do you think one is better than the other? That's kind of where I'm going with this, is I don't think one is better than the other at all. They both have very valid uses, and they both have high points and low points. So, as far as I'm concerned, one is not better than the other. Yeah. Well, I'm rolling up to the house now. So, this is where stuff gets interesting, because I get to back in every night. Hazards on, first gear, pull out, reverse, mirrors. You gotta watch all your mirrors. You can't watch just the one. So if you watch just the one, then you don't know what's going on the other side. And that's when you end up in trouble. Like I am right now. Almost. Then you end up backing over your grass just a slight bit. Hazards off. Engine off. And we're here. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, please. If you're new to the channel, which I'm pretty sure anyone that's going to watch this is, hit subscribe. Please. Not for any other reason than, you know, I post random thoughts like this, and maybe you might want to watch them. Maybe not. So go ahead and subscribe. Like if you like it, dislike it if you don't. But leave me a comment. Tell me what you think. What's your opinion on it? I want to hear. I want to start a discussion with this. Let's see how many people we can get talking about it. Manual versus automatic. Which one do you prefer? Not even which one is better or which one's worse. Just what do you prefer? All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great afternoon. Be safe. And remember, dirty side down.